Let me tell you something powerful. Discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you build. It's not a personality trait. It's a skill that your brain, your body, and your daily systems can master. And if you understand how your mind works, how your neurobiology is wired, you can reprogram it for extreme discipline, unshakable focus, and relentless consistency. Discipline is often mistaken as a character trait, something a person either has or doesn't have. But modern neuroscience, particularly research inspired by experts like Andrew Huberman, shows us something radically empowering. Discipline is not fixed, it's not genetic fate, it's not something mystical that a few people are born with. It's a trainable skill and its roots lie deep within the structure of the human brains, specifically in a region called the prefrontal cortex. This part of the brain, located right behind your forehead, is responsible for executive functions like decision making, impulse control, and future planning. Every time you make a decision that goes against immediate comfort, whether it's waking up early, resisting junk food, or sitting down to focus on deep work, you are engaging and strengthening this part of the brain. What's extraordinary is how adaptive the brain truly is. The concept of neuroplasticity tells us that our brain is always rewiring itself based on our behaviors. The more you practice self-discipline, the more you reinforce neural circuits that make it easier next time. It's like lifting weights. Your first rep may feel heavy and impossible, but with consistency, your muscles adapt, and soon the same weight becomes easy. Discipline works the same way. The first time you get up at 5 a.m. to train, your body resists. Your mind makes excuses, but if you repeat that behavior enough times, your brain starts to recognize that pattern as the new normal. It rewires itself to expect it, and eventually to prefer it. The key lies in understanding that you don't need to wait until you feel ready or inspired to start acting disciplined. You need to act before the feeling comes. Neuroscience shows that action precedes emotion in many cases. If you force yourself to move, get up, start working, avoid distractions, you activate the neural systems involved in goal-directed behavior. These systems then release neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine, which make you feel more motivated, more focused, and more in control. So you don't need to feel disciplined to act disciplined. You need to act disciplined to become disciplined. There's also a feedback loop at play. Every time you follow through on a disciplined behavior, even if it's small, making your bed, skipping the junk food, finishing a task before checking your phone, you give yourself evidence that you're a person who follows through. This builds trust in yourself, and trust is the foundation of consistency. The more consistently you follow through, the stronger the identity becomes, I am a disciplined person, and the stronger that identity becomes, the easier it is to act in alignment with it. That's how self-discipline becomes automatic, not through forcing yourself endlessly, but by gradually shifting your image through repeated action. But this process also requires structure. You can't rely on discipline alone. The brain loves predictability and clarity. If your days are chaotic, unstructured, and filled with constant decision-making, you burn out your willpower quickly. That's why disciplined people create routines. They automate the beginning of their day, their meals, their workouts, their work blocks, not because they're rigid, but because they understand that discipline thrives when you reduce the need to make constant choices. Every choice is a point of friction. Every point of friction drains mental energy, and when energy runs out, so does discipline. So structure is not the enemy of freedom. It is what protects it. By creating routines, you conserve mental bandwidth, making it easier to apply self-control where it matters most. It's also important to understand that setbacks are not failure. From a neuroscience perspective, every failure is a chance to strengthen a different kind of circuit, the resilience circuit. When you mess up and get back on track quickly, you teach your brain that discipline is not about being perfect. It's about being consistent asterisk over time asterisk. That mindset of recovery, not perfection, is essential because the brain doesn't respond well to shame. If you punish yourself mentally for slipping up, you activate the stress centers of the brain, which can lead to avoidance, procrastination, and even addictive behavior. But if you reframe a failure as feedback and get back to action, you keep reinforcing the identity of a disciplined person, someone who shows up regardless. Ultimately, discipline is not about forcing yourself to suffer endlessly. It's about making decisions that are in service of your future self. It's about aligning your daily actions with your long-term vision. And neuroscience has shown that when you live this way, when your behaviors consistently align with your goals, you experience greater cognitive clarity, emotional stability, and even physical health benefits. So discipline, far from being a grind, is actually one of the most rewarding ways to live. It gives you control in a world of chaos. It gives you power when motivation disappears, and it gives you purpose when comfort tries to pull you off course. So if you want extreme discipline, don't wait for a personality change. Start training your brain today. One behavior, one repetition, one choice at a time. Your biology will follow. Your identity will evolve. And over time, the version of you that once struggled to be consistent will become the one who never misses. That's not magic. That's science. Most people think dopamine is simply the feel-good chemical, something that floods your brain when you win, achieve, or succeed. But that's only a part of the story. If you dig into the neuroscience, you'll discover something much more powerful. Dopamine is not just about the reward, it's about the pursuit of the reward. That's a game changer when it comes to building extreme discipline, because it means motivation isn't something you wait for. It's something you can generate internally by engaging in action, by setting goals, by chasing hard things, and by learning to find satisfaction in the effort itself. Every time you set a goal and move toward it, even if it's small, your brain releases dopamine. The key is the anticipation of reward, not the reward itself. Think about it. When you're on a disciplined streak, working out consistently, eating clean, getting things done, you often feel more driven during the process than at the finish line. That's not accidental. It's how the brain is wired. Evolution designed dopamine to encourage persistence. It's a mechanism that pushes you forward, especially when the reward is uncertain or distant. That means the longer you stay in pursuit mode, the more dopamine you generate. So discipline is not about waiting to feel good to take action. It's about taking action to feel good, and here's where it gets even more interesting. Dopamine can be trained. If you always reward yourself with something external, food, scrolling, entertainment, your brain gets used to outsourcing dopamine. You become dependent on external hits to feel good. But if you train yourself to attach dopamine to effort, to internal wins, like finishing a deep work session or pushing through a hard workout, then your brain starts to crave the work itself. That's when discipline flips from a struggle to a craving. You begin to enjoy the grind because your brain learns that the process is where the real reward lies. Huberman talks about this in terms of reward prediction error. When your brain expects a reward and doesn't get it, dopamine drops. When it gets an unexpected reward, dopamine spikes. This means you can train your mind to embrace uncertainty and use it to your advantage. When you delay gratification, when you hold off on the instant reward, you build deeper satisfaction later on. That teaches your brain that long-term effort pays off, and it makes you more resilient to distraction, procrastination, and impulse. One of the most effective ways to leverage dopamine for discipline is through something called intermittent reward. Instead of giving yourself a treat every time you succeed, you space them out. Some days you work hard and don't get a reward. Other days, unexpectedly, you reward yourself. This mirrors how the brain evolved in nature. Humans didn't find food or success every day. This unpredictability keeps your dopamine system sensitive, primed, and hungry for action. Another way to hack this system is by setting micro goals. Every time you break a task into smaller steps and complete one, your brain gives you a hit of dopamine. That's why crossing something off a to-do list feels good. It's a neurological win, and those micro wins add up. They build momentum. They make the mountain look climbable, and when the brain sees progress, it leans in even harder. Progress fuels motivation. That's the cycle, and you can use it every single day. Now, what blocks this process is chasing cheap dopamine. Junk food, endless scrolling, constant stimulation. These activities flood your brain with unnatural spikes of dopamine, but with no real effort involved. Over time, your baseline dopamine drops and real effort, like working, studying, training, feels boring or unbearable. That's why one of the most powerful ways to restore discipline is a ** dopamine detox **. It's not a trend, it's neuroscience. When you cut out easy dopamine sources for even 24-48 hours, your brain begins to resensitize. Suddenly, reading a book or doing deep work starts to feel rewarding again. That's the biology of discipline at work. But this leads us into another essential part of discipline, repetition, Your brain is constantly learning, adapting, and rewiring itself. That process is called neuroplasticity. Every time you repeat an action, especially one that requires effort, you strengthen the neural pathway associated with it. That means discipline is not just about willpower. It's about making the right behaviors so familiar, so automatic, that your brain starts doing them on autopilot. The more reps you do, the less effort it takes. That's why routines are so powerful. When you wake up and do the same actions every morning, like journaling, hydrating, exercising, you're not just building habits, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're telling your nervous system, *, this is who I am, this is how I start my day, and when those actions are repeated consistently, they move from the conscious part of the brain to the subconscious. They become automatic, and once something becomes automatic, it requires almost no energy to sustain. But in the beginning, repetition requires resistance. Your brain will resist the new behavior. It will pull you toward what's comfortable, what's familiar. That's not laziness, that's biology. Your nervous system doesn't like change. It prefers efficiency, and building new pathways is energy intensive. But if you understand this, you can lean into the resistance. You can expect the discomfort and move anyway. Every time you do, you make that pathway stronger. Every time you finish what you start, you reinforce the identity of someone who follows through. Repetition is how you override the old patterns. It's how you silence the inner voice that says, just skip it today. And over time, repetition creates rhythm, and rhythm becomes routine, and routine becomes identity. That's the real path to extreme discipline, not magic, not motivation, but deliberate action, repeated daily, until it becomes who you are. Human beings are creatures of habit, and our brains are designed to recognize patterns, automate behavior, and reduce cognitive effort. That's why repetition is such a powerful force when it comes to building discipline. Each time you perform a task, especially a task that involves resistance, discomfort, or focused effort, you're sending a signal to your brain that this action matters. Your brain takes note, and through the process of neuroplasticity, it begins to strengthen the neural pathways responsible for that behavior. Over time, what once felt hard becomes easier, and what once required motivation becomes second nature. This is the science behind consistency. Repetition wires your brain for long-term success. When you look at the structure of the brain, particularly the basal ganglia, you begin to understand how habits form. The basal ganglia is involved in storing routine behaviors and automating them, so the conscious mind doesn't have to think so hard. This allows you to free up mental energy for more complex decisions. The more often you perform a behavior, waking up at the same time, sticking to a workout schedule, starting your workday with focus, the more your brain pushes that behavior into the automatic domain. This reduces the friction of starting, which is where most people fail. The hardest part of any disciplined action is initiating it, but repetition removes that barrier. The task doesn't become less demanding, but your brain becomes more efficient at executing it. Think about how this applies to physical training. When you first start lifting weights, your muscles fatigue quickly, your form is shaky, and everything feels unnatural. But after weeks or months of consistent reps, your body adapts. The movement becomes fluid, the soreness decreases, and you start to crave the challenge. That's not just physical adaptation. It's also neurological. The same applies to mental discipline. If you repeat focused work sessions every day at the same time, your brain begins to anticipate it. The distractions lose their pull. The urge to procrastinate weakens. You've trained your neural circuitry to lock in, and now it's working for you, not against you. But here's where most people go wrong. They seek novelty. The brain loves stimulation, and in a world filled with infinite choices, there's a constant temptation to switch things up. This habit of chasing novelty prevents deep wiring. It keeps the brain in a shallow state, always restarting, never reinforcing. The truly disciplined individuals understand that success lies in repetition, doing the boring work, mastering the fundamentals, sticking with routines long enough for them to produce results. Because it's not variety that breeds mastery, it's repetition with intention. The challenge is getting through the first phase, the resistance phase. This is where the behavior feels unnatural, the mind wants to quit, and the rewards aren't visible yet. Most people give up in this phase because they misinterpret discomfort as failure. But neuroscience tells us that discomfort is the very signal that change is happening. When you feel that resistance and push through it, you activate the brain's learning systems. You lay down new myelin around neural circuits, making them faster and more efficient. This is the hardwiring of discipline, and it only happens through consistent action repeated over time. Now this process doesn't happen in isolation. It depends heavily on the environment in which you place yourself. Environment has more impact on behavior than most people realize. In fact, it often shapes behavior more than motivation or willpower. If you are trying to build discipline in an environment that's chaotic, noisy, or full of distractions, your brain is constantly battling external stimuli. That drains your energy, it increases decision fatigue, and it makes focused, repetitive action almost impossible. This is why setting up a disciplined environment is not just helpful, it's essential. You must remove friction from the behaviors you want to do more of and increase friction for the behaviors you want to avoid. If you want to wake up early and exercise, lay out your clothes the night before. If you want to write every morning, have your workspace clean and ready. If you want to reduce screen time, keep your phone out of reach or in another room. These changes may seem small, but they are powerful because they shape the path of least resistance. Your brain will always take the easier path, so if you design your environment to make discipline easier, you increase your chances of success without relying on willpower alone. Willpower is like a battery, it runs out. But an environment that supports discipline is like a solar panel. It constantly recharges your energy by reducing decision points. The fewer choices you have to make, the more energy you preserve for doing the actual work. That's why disciplined people often seem robotic to others. They eat the same meals, train at the same time, follow a fixed schedule. But that's not weakness. It's strategy. It's how they remove variables and maintain consistency. There's another powerful environmental factor, social surroundings. If the people around you are lazy, distracted, or unmotivated, your brain will adapt to fit that mold. But if you're surrounded by focused, disciplined, high-performing individuals, your brain begins to elevate. That's mirror neuron activity at work. you subconsciously mimic the behaviors of those around you. So, curating your environment isn't just about physical space, but also about emotional and psychological proximity. Who you spend time with matters, what you consume matters, what you allow into your mental space matters. In the end, repetition and environment form the backbone of discipline. One strengthens the neural pathways that support action, and the other reduces the resistance to taking those actions. Together, they create a system that turns discipline from something you have to force into something that flows naturally from your habits, surroundings, and identity. One of the biggest myths about discipline is that it relies purely on willpower. People assume that to stay consistent, focused, and committed, they need to constantly fight temptation and push through exhaustion. But neuroscience shows us that this approach is unsustainable. Willpower is finite. It gets depleted throughout the day with every decision, every distraction resisted, every temptation avoided. So if you rely on brute force, eventually you'll give in. That's why the most disciplined people don't just try harder, they build *** environments *** that make disciplined action almost effortless. They don't just use their willpower, they conserve it by designing spaces, routines, and systems that remove unnecessary decisions and distractions. Environment is a hidden force that quietly shapes behavior, and when you learn to control it, discipline becomes less about fighting yourself and more about flowing with the right structure. The human brain is highly sensitive to external cues. It responds to signals in the environment before it even begins to engage conscious thought. For example, when you walk into your kitchen and see a cookie on the counter, your brain begins a reward prediction loop before you've even decided to eat it. That's why environments filled with friction, distractions, temptations, clutter, and unpredictability pull your attention away from your goals. They hijack your focus and make it harder to stay aligned with your values. On the other hand, environments designed for clarity, simplicity, and intention create fewer decision points, and fewer decision points mean less mental fatigue. One of the most effective strategies for enhancing discipline is reducing decision fatigue. Decision fatigue refers to the way your mental energy declines after making too many choices. Every small decision, what to wear, what to eat, when to start work, drains your cognitive resources. Over time, the brain gets tired, and when that happens, it defaults to the easiest, most comfortable behavior, which is usually the one you're trying to avoid. That's why many high-performing people, from athletes to entrepreneurs, automate as much of their day as possible. They wear similar clothes every day, they eat the same meals, they wake up and go to bed at consistent times. It's not about being robotic, it's about preserving energy for the hard decisions that really matter. If you want extreme discipline, you need to start by removing low-value choices from your day. You also need to reduce friction for the behaviors you want and increase friction for the ones you don't. Friction is any resistance between you and the action. For example, if your phone is within reach, checking it is frictionless. That's why it's so hard to resist. But if you put it in another room, or turn it off, or use an app blocker, you've added friction. Now, that distraction requires effort. The brain is lazy by design. It always goes for the path of least resistance. So if you want to meditate every morning, leave your cushion or mat out where you'll see it. If you want to read more, keep a book by your bed instead of your phone. If you want to eat healthy, remove junk food from your kitchen entirely. These small adjustments compound over time and make discipline automatic. Environmental cues also play a role in priming your brain for specific actions. This is tied to the concept of context, dependent memory which means the environment you're in influences how your brain retrieves and stores information. If you always work in the same spot, your brain begins to associate that space with deep focus. If you always relax in the same place, your brain recognizes it as a signal to rest. This is why it's so important to have boundaries between spaces, work in a specific location, sleep in a different one, train in another. Mixing them together, like working in bedcan, fuses the brain and weakens those context cues. When your environment has clear associations, it becomes easier to drop into the right mindset with less resistance. Another often overlooked aspect of environment is digital space ***. Your phone, computer, and even your inbox are part of your environment. If your digital space is cluttered with notifications, distractions, and dopamine traps like social media, it becomes impossible to stay disciplined. Your brain is constantly being pulled away from long-term focus and into short-term gratification. Clean up your digital world, remove unnecessary apps, use focus modes, turn off non-essential notifications, make your screen boring so that your real life can become exciting. This digital reset is one of the most powerful forms of environmental control in the modern world. But perhaps the most impactful environmental factor of all is people. Human beings are deeply social, and we are constantly mirroring the behavior, values, and energy of those around us. If you spend your time around lazy, distracted, or negative people, you will inevitably be pulled in their direction. But if you surround yourself with people who live with purpose, train hard, stay focused, and hold high standards, your brain will begin to adapt. You'll naturally begin to elevate your behavior to match the group. This isn't motivation, it's biology. Mirror neurons fire when we observe others, and they shape our own behavior. So if you want to build extreme discipline, seek out a disciplined environment, not just physically, but socially and emotionally. In the end, your environment is either helping you or hurting you. It's either pulling you forward or holding you back. Willpower is like a match. It can spark the flame of action, but without the right conditions, that flame goes out. Environment is like the oxygen. It sustains the fire, it fuels consistency, and it keeps your discipline alive even on the days you feel tired, uninspired, or overwhelmed. Don't just fight for discipline. Build a world around you where discipline thrives. Let your surroundings become your silent coach, your invisible mentor, your edge. Because when you shape your environment with intention, your behavior begins to align, and discipline stops being something you force, and starts being something you live. One of the most effective and scientifically backed ways to build extreme discipline is by voluntarily exposing yourself to controlled stress. This concept is known as stress inoculation, and it's grounded in both neuroscience and behavioral psychology. The idea is simple. By facing small, manageable discomforts on a regular basis, you train your nervous system to remain calm, focused, and resilient under pressure. You're not avoiding stress. You're conditioning your brain and body to respond to it with control rather than chaos. In doing so, you become more capable of handling life's real challenges without breaking down or giving up. This is the edge that separates disciplined individuals from the rest. They don't seek comfort. They seek controlled hardship to sharpen their mindset and stabilize their internal state. The human brain is designed to survive, and one of its primary objectives is to avoid pain. But here's the paradox: when you constantly avoid discomfort, your tolerance for stress weakens, your resilience drops. The smallest obstacles begin to feel overwhelming. This is what happens to people who are always chasing ease. When difficulty shows up, they panic, procrastinate, or freeze. But if you regularly expose yourself to controlled challenges, such as cold exposure, intense exercise, fasting, early waking, or focused work blocks without distractions, you begin to rewire how your brain perceives stress. Instead of seeing it as a threat, your brain begins to see it as a signal to rise, to act, to engage. That's a fundamental shift in mindset, and it creates real psychological strength. Cold exposure, for example, has become a widely studied tool for stress inoculation. When you step into a cold shower or ice bath, your body goes into a state of heightened alert. Your breathing speeds up, your heart rate spikes, and your stress hormones rise. But here's where the training happens. If you stay calm, control your breathing, and endure the discomfort without panicking, you send a powerful message to your brain. You teach it that stress doesn't have to equal fear or avoidance. Over time, this builds your tolerance to all types of stress, not just cold. You become less reactive to emotional stress, work pressure, and even physical fatigue. That's discipline at the nervous system level. Another powerful form of stress inoculation is physical training. Hard, consistent exercise does more than just build muscle or burn fat. It trains the brain to push through resistance. When your legs are shaking, your lungs are burning, and your body is begging you to stop, but you choose to continue, you are practicing the art of mental override. You're teaching your brain that you are in charge, not your feelings, not your fatigue, not your excuses. And the effects go beyond the gym. That same neural circuitry is activated when you sit down to focus on a difficult task, resist a craving, or choose discipline over distraction. Every rep, every sprint, every grueling workout is a vote for the identity of someone who does hard things. Fasting is another practice that challenges the nervous system. When you go without food for a period of time, especially if you're used to eating every few hours, your body and brain initially resist. You feel irritable, distracted, and tired, but when you push through, your body adapts, your mind becomes clearer, your blood sugar stabilizes, you learn to separate physical sensation from emotional reaction. And more importantly, you learn to delay gratification, an essential pillar of discipline. The ability to hold off on pleasure, to not give in to every urge, is a skill that translates directly into productivity, self-control, and long-term success. Stress inoculation is not about punishing yourself. It's about strengthening your response system, sharpening your will, and becoming emotionally anti-fragile. Digital detoxing is another area where this principle applies. In a world of constant stimulation, choosing to unplug to go hours or even days without mindless scrolling, instant gratification, or endless notifications is a powerful act of resistance. It forces your brain to confront boredom, stillness, and discomfort. And in that discomfort, you find depth, you rediscover focus, you begin to reset your dopamine system so that simple, meaningful tasks start to feel rewarding again. When you deny yourself the easy hits of dopamine, you become more sensitive to the value of real effort. This recalibration is vital for maintaining long-term discipline in a hyper-distracted world. Sleep discipline also falls under this category. Going to bed and waking up at the same time every day, even on weekends, might seem rigid, but it's another form of controlled stress. You are teaching your brain and body that consistency matters more than indulgence. And when you prioritize sleep, your cognitive function improves, your emotional regulation sharpens, your willpower refills. This makes it easier to stick to other areas of discipline because your body is rested and your brain is optimized. What all these practices have in common is that they train your brain to handle adversity. They build emotional tolerance. They teach you not to panic in the face of challenge, but to stay steady. That's the foundation of unbreakable discipline. You're not reacting from emotion. You're responding from strength. And this strength doesn't come from being lucky or fearless. It comes from exposure, from practice, from repetition. Each controlled discomfort builds up your inner armor, layer by layer, until you're no longer intimidated by resistance. You welcome it. This doesn't mean you need to live in suffering. The point isn't to be miserable. It's to become more capable, more resilient, more in control. By voluntarily stepping into discomfort, you build a mind that doesn't crumble when life gets hard. You build a body that doesn't quit when it's tired. And you build a spirit that can say yes to purpose even when comfort is calling your name. That's the kind of discipline that lasts. That's the kind that endures when motivation dies. And that's the kind that rewires you into someone who doesn't just survive pressure, but thrives under it. Discipline becomes truly unshakable when it is rooted in identity. Most people approach discipline as a behavior. They try to force themselves to act differently, to eat better, to work harder, to stay focused. But those behaviors are fragile when they are disconnected from self-image. If you see yourself as someone who is lazy, inconsistent, or unmotivated, then no matter how hard you try to behave differently, you'll always feel like an imposter. Eventually, you'll revert back to your internal identity because your brain wants to stay in alignment with who it thinks you are. That's why lasting discipline only happens when you shift your identity first. When you start to believe at a deep level, I am a disciplined person, your actions begin to follow naturally, and the key to this transformation lies in repetition, reflection, and reinforcement. Every time you complete a task that requires effort or focus, you are not just checking off a box, you're casting a vote for the type of person you are becoming. When you wake up early, resist distraction, train hard, or finish what you start, you send a powerful message to your brain. This is who I am now. And over time, these small choices compound. They don't just create habits, they reshape your self-image. You no longer need to rely on constant motivation because your behavior flows from your new identity. You don't have to force yourself to act disciplined. You act disciplined because that's simply the kind of person you believe yourself to be. This isn't wishful thinking, it's rooted in neuroscience. The brain constantly rewires itself based on repeated experience. Your neural circuits are shaped not just by what you do, but by what you believe about yourself. When your actions and beliefs are in conflict, the brain experiences cognitive dissonance, a state of internal tension. That tension is unsustainable, and your brain will work to resolve it. So if you act with discipline, but still believe you're undisciplined, your brain will sabotage your efforts to bring things back into alignment. But if you take control of that narrative, if you tell yourself every day, I am someone who shows up, I follow through, I do hard things, and then back that belief with action, your brain begins to rewire. You dissolve the old identity and build a new one in its place. Language is an essential part of this process. The words you use to describe yourself matter deeply. Saying I'm trying to be disciplined is very different from saying I am disciplined. One is tentative, the other is decisive. Your subconscious listens to your language. When you speak with certainty, your brain responds by reinforcing that belief. And over time, it begins to look for evidence that your statement is true. This creates a feedback loop. Belief drives action, and action reinforces belief. That loop becomes the engine of identity change, and identity change is what makes discipline sustainable. This is also why rituals and routines are so important. Rituals aren't just tools for productivity, they are anchors for identity. When you do the same focused actions every day, waking up early, journaling, stretching, training, you create a predictable framework that your brain begins to associate with your sense of self. You're no longer reacting to the world, you're shaping it, starting from within. And each time you follow through, especially when it's hard, you build trust with yourself. That self-trust is the foundation of confidence. It tells your brain, I keep my promises. And once your brain believes that, your need for external motivation begins to fade. But this doesn't mean you have to be perfect. Discipline rooted in identity isn't about being flawless. It's about being consistent and resilient. Everyone slips up. Everyone has off days. The difference is in how quickly you bounce back. When your identity is clear, failure doesn't derail you. If you miss a workout, you don't spiral. You say, that's not like me. And you return the next day. That quick return is powerful because it strengthens your belief in your own consistency. The gap between failure and recovery gets smaller. The emotional charge behind mistakes gets weaker. You begin to see discipline not as a rigid prison, but as a flexible structure that always welcomes you back. Another critical component of identity, self-based discipline is visualization. The brain cannot easily distinguish between imagined and real experiences. When you visualize yourself acting with discipline, showing up, performing with focus, saying no to temptation, you activate the same neural pathways involved in the real behavior. That mental rehearsal prepares your brain to act accordingly in real life. The more vividly and frequently you visualize your disciplined self, the more familiar that identity becomes, and the brain loves familiarity. It naturally gravitates toward what feels known. So, when discipline becomes your default image of yourself, acting in alignment with it feels less like a struggle and more like a return home. Ultimately, this kind of identity-driven discipline becomes effortless because it's no longer about trying to be something you're not. It's about being fully aligned with who you truly are. The strongest discipline isn't loud. It doesn't need constant declarations or dramatic displays. It's quiet, automatic, and steady, flowing from an internal place of knowing. You become the kind of person who no longer negotiates with excuses because excuses don't fit your story. You no longer need to psych yourself up because your identity doesn't require convincing. You act with discipline because it's simply what you do and who you are. And when your identity and your behavior match, you become unstoppable, not because you're never tempted, but because your default is strong enough to withstand the noise. That's the power of self-image. That's the science of lasting discipline. And that's how you build a life of consistency, focus, and quiet strength that no external force can take away.